There's so many times when I get to the end of a day and I just haven't done the thing that I really wanted to do that day or the thing I knew I had to do that day. And I want to know, is my brain trying to sabotage me? Self-sabotage is described as any action that takes us away from making progress towards our goals or doing something that's beneficial to us as well. And to me, it doesn't make sense. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to stop ourselves from being in good situations or doing things that will be better for our health? So I decided to do a little exercise and write down some of the things that stop me doing what I want. Is it self-sabotage though? Is it not? We'll get to that in a bit. But for me, some of the things that get in the way of doing tasks that I want to do is being all or nothing with my thinking. I have to either give 100% to something or 0%. And that is just absolutely hideous for trying to make progress on things, because when can you ever give 100%? It's so, so rare. So if I'm not gonna be perfect, I'm not gonna do it. So yeah, I do that all the time. Not giving myself the time I need to do things. So I love to schedule. I love planning my day, but I do overschedule at times. And I will say, oh, this is only gonna take me 30 minutes, like filming a YouTube like this. Okay, 30 minutes, no problem. So I'll put it in for 30 minutes. Realistically, it takes so much longer when you set everything up, when you sit down, when you blah, blah, blah. It takes longer than that. And so then I'll knock everything else off course, feel all out of sorts for the rest of the day, and then not get the things done that I want to do. Deadlines that no one cares about but me. I do this all the time. I will say, if this YouTube isn't ready to go out by Thursday at 6 o'clock, it's not going out. Like, no one cares, really. If I put the YouTube out on Friday at 2 in the morning, no one cares but me, but I self-impose deadlines, and then that stops me from doing the work. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not gonna get it done by tonight anyway, so I'll just leave it. Over-researching / perfectionism. With science, there's always more to know, there's always more to be done. And when I make a video like this, I always wanna cover all the bases. And I do my very best to, but I'm one person. I'm reading the research that I can read and then trying to summarize it into my own way to explain about it. But I'm always like, oh my God, I could just read a few more papers. Oh my God, there could be just more. So that's something. And then self-talk. This is something that recently I've had a real big realization about, because I was lying in bed one morning and I was going like, oh, what's the point in like doing that? Like, it's just not gonna work, blah, 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 blah. And I stepped back and I was like, shit, this is a way that I stop myself doing things. I just go like, what's the point in my head? And it feels so real. It feels like that is the conclusion, the accurate assessment of the situation. Like, there is no point, when really there's so many other thoughts that I could have in that moment. But I realized, oh my God, that is something that's massively held me back over the years, just listening to my own little noggin saying like, don't do it. So are these things trying to intentionally sabotage my goals? Is there like a little self-sabotaging demon that's sat in my head? Sadly, it's not a little demon that's sat in my head that I can just like pluck out and get rid of. When you Google self-sabotage neuroscience, not much comes up. It's one of these terms that's really been popularized by social media, and a lot of people use it now, but actually the research behind it isn't really there in terms of the neuroscience. I think the psychology a little bit more in terms of like how it makes us behave. But in terms of what's actually happening in the brain, doesn't really exist yet. But we can sort of try and think about it not as self-sabotage, but as emotional dysregulation, because that is sort of what it is. It's where we lose control over our emotional state. Our emotional state overrides the logical thing that we want to do. And that's something that has been much, much more studied than self-sabotage. Whenever we're pursuing something new, we might think, oh my God, this is gonna be amazing. I'm gonna have the best time ever. My life's gonna change. Be really excited. But in any sort of new thing that you try and do, you're gonna have negative emotions. There are gonna be times where things don't work out the way you thought they would, where things get really tough and there's a lot to learn and a lot of new things to try and get your head around. A lot of effort has to go into it. And I think in these situations that our emotional regulation is so important. And that is a way the brain can buffer these emotional states by using frontal areas of the brain to exert control over the areas which are the ones that influence our emotional state. Emotional mediating brain regions include the amygdala, and this is an area which is really important for processing emotions and then signaling down to the body what emotional state we are in. And then also there's the ventral striatum, and this is an area which is important in reward valuation, so saying whether things in our environment are worth pursuing or whether something's threatening and that we should avoid it. Then there are frontal regions which act as almost like a volume control on our emotion. They can either enhance the emotional activity that we feel or they can dampen it. And this volume control gets better as we reach adulthood. When we're little kids, there isn't much connection between these frontal volume controls and the emotional centers. You see like a 2-year-old having an absolute tantrum. That's because they do not have the emotional regulation. That is emotional dysregulation at its finest. Something happens and they just kick off, and there isn't much to buffer. Then through our teen years, our frontal centers mature, and so we get better and finer control over our emotions. But as adults, we can still have periods of emotional dysregulation. There could be just certain triggers that really make you like go off the handle or see red. And then there are like the more subtle emotional dysregulation instances that we find ourselves in, where something might just feel a bit uncomfortable. I always like to think about in my body, how do I feel? Like, do I feel a bit jittery? Do I feel a bit like sicky? Or do I feel a bit, I don't know, like a lot of energy that I want to sort of get out of me? And in those instances, it's just that we can choose to do something which will get us out of that state. There is another option which might make us feel a little bit better. This is classic procrastination. It's my favorite saying, like procrastination is a choice. It is, instead of doing this thing that's making us feel bad or that's taking a lot of effort, a lot of energy, why don't you just do this other thing instead, which will de-stress you, it will take you out of this situation, it might feel good. So that's the classic procrastination. There's also a ruminating spiral, I think, that we can find ourselves in, which is another form of like emotional dysregulation. Like you go, well, if so-and-so were to do this, then this could happen, then this could happen. And you go in this sort of weird spiral of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And that's another way that we're not regulating the emotional state that we're in. Because if we could take a bit of a bird's eye view and be like, well, none of this has happened yet, that's a way of regulating the emotions. So when we're dysregulated, we can go into that sort of like, oh my God, if I do this thing, everyone's going to hate me and I'm going to lose all my friends. Ah! The other side of things is that the self-sabotage that we might find ourselves doing, we do it because it's already our default response to something. The sugar example is a good one. Say you're wanting to not eat as much sugar, but your default response to stress is going to the cupboard and eating 3 biscuits. When you are stressed, you might just find yourself craving the sugar or not even noticing the craving and just facing the biscuit tin. And we will see that as a form of self-sabotage, when it's not really an active process, it is just a programmed response to a situation. So the self-sabotage isn't this like active, oh my God, let's wreck everything. It could be the case in this situation that some of the behaviors that you do more automatically, more as a default, that feel easier to do because you've done them time and time again, are the things that you now do not want to do, because these are the things that are keeping you from achieving or working towards whatever it is that you're trying to do. So does it have to get in the way? Because people achieve goals. I've achieved goals in my life, even though in these instances, I'm always like, oh my God, that doesn't count because, you know, there's always a reason, perfectionism. But self-sabotage doesn't stop people from achieving goals. So it's not like it's always gonna win in situations, even though it feels like a lot of the time, oh my God, I've just done that thing and why did I do that? So I think a few things maybe can buffer the level of sabotaging that we do to ourselves. The first is confidence, because if I was really confident in what I was doing, would I sabotage myself? I like to think of it as like, if I was making an album, well, like a music album, and I had no confidence in myself as an artist, as a singer, every single little roadblock that came my way, every single bit of negative feedback or failure, I would see as, oh my God, this is awful. And then I might do a behavior because I've interpreted it so negatively. That might then make me act out in a way of like trying to avoid the negativity. So procrastinate on something, or I could get into that rumination as well. If I was Rihanna making an album, she is amazing. And I'm sure when she's making music, there are so many times where she'll hit roadblocks or things won't feel quite right. Or she might be, oh, that wasn't like the best song in the world that I made. But she's Rihanna. And I'm sure she's probably not going to be sabotaging herself in that instance because she knows she's the boss. She knows she's good at making music. I listened to this podcast once and honestly, it blew my mind. It was with Kim Kardashian and she was asked, have you ever doubted yourself? And she said no. I was like, how nice it must be to live in a head where you never doubt yourself. She's like, no, I've never doubted myself. I always just know that I can get it. And I think if you have that level of confidence, you wouldn't be sabotaging yourself as much. So for me, building up that confidence, I think there's a few things that come into it. One is evidence. So like, is there evidence that I can do this thing or have done this thing before? There might be a back catalogue if you're trying to sit an exam and you've done exams in the past and you've done okay in them, then you can go, look, I've sat exams before and it has gone well. Other times the evidence might not be there when you're doing something new. I think in that instance, you want to build up the evidence in tiny little ways. So do small things that go, but I did do that little thing. And then you can start to piece together the confidence that you can do the big thing. Then there's self-efficacy, which is believing in your abilities. And again, I like to think of these as different skills that I have that might not necessarily be directly involved in what I'm doing right now, or they could be directly involved, but thinking of everything as a set of skills and like, okay, this is the task, what are the skills I need to do that thing? And if you have those skills, then you can either use them if you're already pretty skilled at it. But with skills, there's always room to like build and improve in like the tiniest little increments, like just practicing a little bit more each day or just trying something, you know, a little bit outside your comfort zone, but not too far outside your comfort zone. And then you can build these skills over time, which should help to build up that self-efficacy and the belief in yourself. And then the self-esteem. This is how much we value ourselves. And I think this is one of the hardest things to change because a lot of this is set when we are growing up from certain attitudes we've faced, from certain behaviors we've experienced, and also there will be definitely genetic components of people who are more sensitive to criticism, etc. I think it's hard with self-esteem to just go like, I think I'm great, because for many of us, like you say that and you just go, I do not believe you at all. I think a lot of people have quite low self-esteem. I've definitely in that situation at times in my life where I'm just like, who are you kidding? Saying, I'm great at this. And I'm like, no, you are not. You can't really lie to yourself. But I think that brings me on to my next point, because what I think is key to sort of either augmenting our self-esteem or being able to just go, do you know what? I'm going to cut myself some slack, is awareness. And I have been walking around with my little head on me for so long, being unaware of certain ways that I speak to myself or certain ways I feel in situations. It's almost like I just thought the thoughts I have, that is my interpretation of the situation, that's accurate, when it's not. When it's not. The list I made at the top of this video was a real good piece in awareness, because a lot of those things, it took me like sitting down and thinking, what do I do in my day that stops me from getting on with things? Actually making the list and going, oh my God, I do things every single day. That was such an important thing, because it makes me see, one, what is it about those things that are more appealing than the thing I wanted to do? And two, are there ways in which I can stop myself doing those things? Are there physical things I can put in the way to stop myself from doing them? That's not always the case, especially when it's like thought-based, but there are definitely certain actions that I can be like, no, get out. The belief to myself, that was a light bulb moment when I was like, shit, that's the way I've been self-sabotaging for years, just going like, it's no point, it's no point. I'm just taking that as gospel of like, yeah, there is no point. Like, there is a point. That is just a way my brain reacts, I think, in the situation where something's quite high in effort, or when I'm like, oh, that's gonna take a lot of energy or something like that, or I'm scared to fail. I don't know. Anyway, there's probably a lot of psychological reasons there. I like to think of a person who's like really good at a task that I want to do. And instead of thinking as me, I go, let's just think right now as if I am Kim Kardashian, who has no self-doubt. Lovely. If I was Kim Kardashian in this situation, what would her head be saying to her? If she's someone with no doubt, what would her head be saying? And then it gives you like, it's not like you have to believe it. It's not about changing the sort of self-esteem of like the belief like I'm the best person in the world. It's more just like other people think in other ways, and can I use that? If I was acting like Kim Kardashian today, could I use her no self-doubt to actually get on with some of the things that I want to do? I found this with social media, because social media is one of my biggest distractors, but it's a hard thing because I use it for work. And there are times when I go on it and I am doing work things, it's very productive. There are other times where it's so unproductive, and actually it's like counterproductive, because I see people who are doing amazing things and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was doing that. And then I feel sad for myself, and then I just want to go and eat a whole bag of Pringles, whatever. So for me now, I started consciously saying when I was on social media, is this thing you're doing right now going to help you achieve what you want to achieve? And I just kept saying it to myself quite consciously, you know, when I was on social media. I was like, is this actually helping you, Julia? Come on, is this helping you? And now I found that it just pops up into my head. Like that thought pops up, especially when I see someone who's absolutely bossing it and doing amazing things. Instead of feeling like jealous and sorry for myself, I go, is what I'm doing right now gonna help me boss it? Like, no, it's not. Or it might be if I'm working on something, but normally, no, it's not. So get off and get on with it. It's really changed. So it was almost this conscious, not brainwashing, but conscious like infiltration of, is this helping you? Is this helping you? Is this helping you? And now it just pops up by itself and does the job. And finally, a huge thing that I think is important in this whole like self-sabotage situation is energy, because there are times in life when you're just knackered, you're absolutely done in, or you've been focusing for hours and then you try and do something that's really difficult. And all of a sudden you are then wanting to do something that's more restorative or something that's a bit more easy or a bit more pleasurable, and you will procrastinate. It's not this self-sabotage and like, oh my God, I'm just like stopping myself doing something. You're just tired. You are just tired. And if you had higher energy, then you might be able to get over that like barrier to entry and get on with something. When we're tired, our frontal areas of the brain are less able to exert their dampening volume control over the emotional centers. So we're much more likely to have a big emotional tidal wave crash in, and we can't really do much to stop the flood. We just sort of go with it. So really looking at your energy levels can also help with this situation. If you haven't slept the night before, you've got like 3 hours sleep and you're trying to work, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself wanting to do something else, then that's something that you can really think, okay, how can I recharge right now? Is there, you know, something that I can do which will give me a bit of energy? For me, counterintuitive, but it is doing a bit of exercise normally gives me a bit of a boost, albeit short term, or even sometimes just a little nap. Like I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to take 30 minutes and have a little nap. And then all of a sudden I do feel so much better. I also try and set my schedule up to account for my tiredness. So I'll obviously have very, very busy days and I've got a lot on, but there are just some times when I've been focusing for ages and I'm trying to do another task which requires a lot of focus. Not gonna happen. So I have a list of things that I'm like, okay, if I can't do that right now, can I do something else from like tomorrow instead? And I'll put that to the next day. So having the little admin tasks like written down, that if I'm just feeling too exhausted to do a big task, I can focus on getting other things done. So I'm still like working towards stuff, but it's not taking all that energy. And then I think the last thing is scheduling your day to work with when you feel the most energetic. For me, that is the morning. First thing in the morning, I just have so much little resistance to actually doing things that I always try and schedule the hardest things for in the morning. Normally when I've just woken up, get to my desk and like do some work. And that massively helps because I just don't have much pushback at all, because maybe I'm just restored or I haven't woke up enough to really register that I'm doing something that I'm actually shit scared of. So our brains are not trying to sabotage us. It's not an active, intentional, spiteful process. What it is a form of emotional dysregulation in a lot of instances. It's our brain trying to cope with this emotional overload And that can happen in a few ways. If something is very new, very energetically demanding, or very effortful, or it has a lot of meaning attached to it and we've tied our identity up, then we can feel very emotional about certain situations, and that can lead us to procrastinate and want to do something else or be a perfectionist about it because we care about it a lot. There is also this element of tiredness. Like if we are tired, we are less able to regulate that emotion. If we feel more confident in our abilities, then we can more easily bat that emotional side down, and then just being aware of some of the things that we say to us and the stories we tell ourselves, because honest to God, those are the things that make me go, whoa, I can't believe I've been doing that for years and years and years, and it's not true. Right, well, that's it from me for this week. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and if you like little bits about the brain, neuroscience, psychology, all that malarkey, trying to understand ourselves a little bit better, then subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!